help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Please support the video with a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you. My name is Emily, and until last week, I believed my husband Ryan was the quiet type, the man who smiled through every awkward moment and never raised his voice, no matter how sharp my jokes became. I used to tell friends that Ryan was bulletproof. It turns out he was simply keeping score in silence. It all began at my sister Claire's birthday dinner, a long table filled with wine glasses, soft fairy lights, and that familiar tension only families can create. Ryan had driven us there, made sure Claire's flowers were perfect, and even ironed my dress while I got ready. He looked so effortlessly polished that I almost felt irritated. When dessert arrived, the conversation drifted toward relationships. Claire's fiancé bragged about surprising her with a spa weekend. Someone asked Ryan what the most romantic thing he had ever done was. He gave a small smile and said, "I make coffee every morning. That counts, right?" Everyone laughed, and for some reason, I felt the urge to turn it into a show. I lifted my glass and said, "Oh, please, Ryan's idea of romance is unloading the dishwasher without me reminding him." Laughter spread around the table. It seemed harmless. I told myself it was just a simple joke. But then I saw his eyes, calm and patient, with that sharp glint people get right before lightning strikes. He gently set his fork down, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and said, "That's fair, Em. But if we're sharing, your idea of romance is posting our fights on Instagram stories before we even finish having them." The entire table went silent. Even the waiter froze mid-pour. My throat tightened, heat rushing to my face. Ryan didn't smirk or lean back like someone delivering a punchline. He simply sat there, composed, staring ahead. I tried to laugh it off. "Okay, ouch," I said with a forced smile. But the moment was already broken. Claire coughed into her napkin. Her fiancé suddenly became very interested in his water glass. The rest of the evening faded into polite whispers and clinking silverware. On the drive home, silence filled the car. Streetlights flashed across the windshield, breaking the quiet into awkward pieces. I wanted to speak, to say anything, but every word sounded defensive in my mind. When we reached the driveway, Ryan turned off the engine and finally spoke. "Do you ever get tired of making me the punchline?" His voice wasn't angry. It was calm, almost worn out. That tone frightened me more than shouting ever could. I started to reply, but he gently raised a hand as if he had practiced this moment. "I don't mind your humor," he said. "But lately it feels like every joke is about how I'm not enough." I opened my mouth to deny it, but memories rushed in. Comments at barbecues, double meanings in front of friends, the small digs I thought were cute. I realized how often I had chipped away at him, hiding insecurity by humor. "I didn't mean to," I said quietly. He nodded. "I know, that's the worst part." We went inside. I sat on the edge of the couch while he removed his jacket, hung it neatly, and walked upstairs. No slammed doors, no sighs, just soft footsteps. That calm hurt more than anger ever could. I spent the night replaying the dinner in my head. The laughter, the silence, the way his eyes stayed steady while mine searched for an escape. Somewhere between pride and guilt, I realized how public humiliation can't be undone with private apologies. The next morning, Ryan made coffee like always. 2 cups, one for him, one for me. He slid mine across the counter and said, "I meant what I said last night. I'm not angry. I'm just done being your favorite story." Something inside me cracked. For years, I had mistaken his patience for indifference, when it was really quiet endurance. I wanted to tell him he was more than enough, that I admired his calm strength. Instead, I stared at the rising steam and said, "You're right. I've been cruel while pretending to be funny." He didn't respond. He picked up his mug and left for work. The door closed softly behind him, leaving the kitchen too quiet, too real. That day, I couldn't focus. Every email blurred, every sound echoed. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message, half afraid of one. None came. By evening, guilt turned into fear. What if that dinner had changed something forever? What if silence became his new language? The next 2 days passed in an uneasy quiet. Ryan wasn't cold. He was polite, careful, almost too kind. He still asked if I wanted coffee, still folded the blanket I left on the couch, but it felt like living with someone who had emotionally moved out. The lack of tension felt heavier than any argument. On the 3rd evening, I decided to make things right. I cooked his favorite meal, roast chicken with garlic butter, and opened the bottle of Merlot we had been saving. When he walked in, he looked surprised, then cautious. "Peace offering?" he asked softly. "Maybe an apology served with dinner," I said, trying to smile. He nodded and sat down, and for a moment, everything felt almost normal. We ate quietly, forks tapping softly against the plates. Then I took a deep breath and said, "Ryan, I shouldn't have made that joke. I know it hurt you." He looked up, his face unreadable. "It's not about one joke, Emily. It's about a pattern. Every time you feel nervous or ignored, you turn me into the story. Everyone laughs, but later I'm the only one who remembers it wasn't funny. His words hit like stones. I wanted to defend myself, to say I was just being playful, but I knew he was right. I had built a small stage out of our marriage and performed on it for years. I thought humor made us real, I said weakly. It did once, he replied, before it became a shield. You stopped talking to me, Em. You started talking about me. Silence stretched between us. I stared at the flickering candlelight, realizing how often I had mistaken his quiet for comfort, when it was really retreat. I thought about that dinner table, how my laughter filled the room while his respect slowly left it. I reached for his hand. I can change that. He looked at our joined hands and sighed. You don't change for someone else, Emily. You change when the mirror starts making you uncomfortable. That sentence struck harder than his comment at dinner. For the first time, I saw the exhaustion behind his calm, the years of holding space for someone who made him small in public and invisible in private. After dinner, he stood and began clearing the plates, an old habit. I followed him to the sink. Are we okay? I asked. He rinsed a glass, set it on the rack, and said, We could be, but not if every apology comes with a punchline. Then he went upstairs again, leaving me in the kitchen with dripping dishes and a heart that felt far too heavy to hold. That night, I lay awake listening to his steady breathing. I realized that silence can be louder than shouting when it comes from someone who has stopped hoping you'll listen. In the morning, I wrote a post, something I never imagined I would do. It wasn't for sympathy, it was for accountability. Public laughter can cost private love. Last week, I made my husband the punchline, and he reminded me that respect isn't a joke. If you've ever laughed at your partner instead of with them, learn from my mistake. I didn't tag him, but I knew he would see it. I placed my phone on the table and went for a walk, my heart racing. When I returned, the post had over 300 comments. People were sharing their own regrets and careless moments. And among them, one comment stood out. Ryan had written, Forgiven, but let's build our stories together next time. I cried then, quietly, the way you do when you realize the person you hurt still wants to meet you halfway. That evening, I found him sitting on the porch watching the sunset. I sat beside him, nervous but hopeful. I didn't expect you to reply, he gave a small smile. I didn't expect you to listen. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need to be fixed. I wanted to say something clever, something light, but instead I said, You were right. I used humor to hide insecurity. I thought if I made everyone laugh first, no one would notice how small I felt. He turned toward me, his eyes gentle. You don't have to shrink to be loved, Em. You just have to stop shrinking me in the process. For the first time in months, I didn't deflect, I didn't joke. I simply nodded and whispered, I'm sorry. He reached for my hand and squeezed it softly. I know we didn't fix everything that night, but as the light faded and the air grew still, I realized that respect doesn't come from grand gestures. It's built in quiet moments where we choose understanding over ego. And somewhere in that stillness, the man who had once clapped back at dinner looked at me not with resentment, but with the faintest hint of a smile, the kind that says, You finally heard me.